Hi and welcome to this new video, and in this video I'm going to be talking about multiplayer. I've got a huge amount to get through, so I'm going to try and keep this as short as I can, but there's a lot to explain, so I apologise if this turns into quite a long video, but I'm going to try and get through it as fast as I can. Okay, so we're just going to select a chameleon here, and this is our new multiplayer page. So what's changed is in 1.11 it used to be multiple screens, in 1.12 it's just one single screen that controls everything. So you select your hosting region along the top, so that's where if you're going to host a room. When I say host, you're just creating a room on the server, you're not actually the host, you just create a room on the server and everyone joins a room on the server. But you can select what region you're hosting in now on the multiplayer page rather than it just being hidden away in the main menu. And then you would type in where you want to host here, whether it be a hidden session or not, and then you click host session. That would host it in Europe. And then below that there's a bit of gap, and now you're into viewing sessions, so you can view your friends in Europe because we've currently got the Europe server selected. If you want to view friends in the US, then you would select the US and then click friends, and now we're viewing friends in America. And if we go back to the EU, we're now showing sessions in Europe. I've sped up the refresh rate on sessions, so it now only takes 3 seconds to show you how any sessions are available on any server. So when you change, you do need to give it 3 seconds just to determine whether there's anything there. Again, just 3 seconds for it to tell you. In terms of the data you get the session name, the race manager, the scenery name and the track name. And then most people have noticed this probably, which is this now says 30 players, so you can now have 30 players in a session. Race mode, so we're telling you whether it's open class or single class, so you know what you're getting into before you get in there. And then it'll either be :A or :M. :A means it's an automatic session, which means resets, just the same as VelociDrone 1.11 now, so you get resets every time you crash. :M is a manual session, and in that mode you have to use arm and disarm and turtle mode because there are no resets. And the reason we're telling you this :A, :M information up front is because if you haven't got your switches configured, then you're just not going to be able to fly in a manual session because you won't be able to arm. So you need to know before you get in there. And if you've got a transmitter where you can't set up your switches, or you haven't got enough channels to set up switches, or whatever the problem might be with having the switches configured, if you haven't got them, then you don't want to join a manual session. And crucially, in 1.12 you cannot change the mode of the session once you're inside of it. So if you start as auto mode, then that session will be auto mode until you leave. And the same for manual. If you start a session in manual mode, it will be in manual mode until you leave. There is no way to change the mode of the session from inside of it, which means that if someone joins who hasn't got switches configured for arm and turtle mode, as a race manager you're not able to suddenly cause that person a problem by changing to manual mode and all of a sudden their switches don't work because they haven't got them configured. Okay, and then the last bit at the bottom here is if you want to join a named session. So if your friend has hosted a hidden session and they've given you the name, then you can type it in here and join that session and it will let you join. Okay, so hopefully that explains this panel. Let's now join a session.
Ready to race.
Okay, so now I'm in a session. I'm not the race manager in this session, and this is having a whinge because I'm running high resolution, I think. What's going on here? Set it on beautiful. Okay. It's not liking the fact that I'm recording and running at high quality and running at 2560 by 1440 as well. Okay, so we're in our session, and if I open up the players in session thing here, you can see that my laptop is the race manager and I'm just a player in the session. Now one of the things we've added is the capability to reassign the race manager. So on my laptop I can say, actually I can click a button next to Ash like so, and I've assigned Ash as the race manager, and you can now see that I've now got a manager button here, and I can assign the race manager back to my laptop if I wish. The other thing to take note of is that we did not change to the pylons scene when the race manager changed. Everyone was notified of who the new race manager is with a message from the new race manager, and the point I want to make about it not changing to the pylon scene is that in 1.11, whenever a race manager leaves, everyone will know that it switches to the pylons scene, because that's a known scene that everyone's got. In 1.12 we don't do that. It's a bit more intelligent. What it does now is it says, okay, I'm currently running this scene, let's just check if this race manager has this scene and that track, and if they do, then it will not default to pylons. So if you're running any of the official tracks, then if the race manager changes, you would never get a change to pylons. If you're running custom tracks, then there is the possibility that it will load the pylons track if the new race manager hasn't got the custom track in their database that you're currently running, so they haven't saved it or they just haven't got that track. Then in that instance it will switch to pylons, and the reason it does that is because it's the race manager's job to give the whatever track you're currently running to people who are joining the session, and if they haven't got it in their database they can't give it to them. So that's why we switch to pylons in that particular situation. Okay, so hopefully we'll get much less switching to the pylon scene when race managers reassigned or race managers leave. It should stay on whatever track you are currently racing. Okay, so that's race manager and reassigning the race manager. Something else you can do in 1.12 is you can now change your color. So if I want to be cyan, I can be cyan. You can see I've changed to cyan here and here, and any other player who's joined the session, I will now be that color. This allows us to have team racing where everyone is the same color, because you can set your color within the session. So if you've got two teams of 3 in a session, then 3 people can be blue and 3 people can be green, and so you know which teams are which. So that's all now possible. The other thing is you've now got Spectator Mode. So you'll have seen on the dialogue on the way in that you can have 30 people in a session, but VelociDrone still works on the basis that only 7 people can fly in a race at once, because we've really only got room on the screen to report on 7 players, and once you get beyond 7 players, the amount of processing that you have to do as people are going through multiple gates and all that sort of thing, it can impact the speed of the game, and therefore we only really want 7 people racing at once. Now, one thing I will mention is that VelociDrone 1.12 has multi-threaded race processing now, so if you had problems being race manager before and it would slow your machine down a bit or make it fly slightly differently, that won't happen anymore because all of the race manager code is multi-threaded. The same for messages appearing in the chat window. Some people said they got a momentary pause from the game when a message appeared in the chat window. That also is no longer the case, and you won't get any issues like that. Back to how many players can be flying at once. You can only have 7 people flying at once in a race. So that means that the 8th player to join a session will be put into Spectator Mode. So first 7 joining automatically fly, 8th up to 30th will join as spectators, and it's down to the race manager to decide who's going to fly in each race, and you can switch people in and out of flight mode from the players in session panel. So if I just spin my quad round here, let me just arm it and change my camera angle so you can see here, just spin it around. Okay, so there's the other player in the session. Let's just disarm. Okay, so that's my laptop sat there and a little Oblivion, and I can make them not be flying like that, and they disappear, and they're now in spectator mode. Now, just because they're in spectator mode doesn't mean they can't still fly. As far as they're concerned, they can still see the other 7 players who are flying, and they can still fly around, they can still fly the track, they can still freestyle, they can do whatever they want. The only thing that won't happen is when the race manager starts a race, they won't be moved to the start grid, gates won't activate for them, they won't be part of the race reporting. They could, if they wanted to, fly to the start grid, and when the race starts, fly off with everyone else and race the other 7 players, but they won't have any gate activations and the other 7 players won't be able to see them, but they can still fly alongside or do whatever they want. But the key thing is, when you're a spectator, you're not in some kind of disabled I can only watch state. You are still able to fly and do whatever you like. It's not a boring state to be in. You're just not part of the active racing. So let's just bring that player back. So they're now no longer spectating, they're now flying, and I'm going to make myself a spectator. So this player who's flying now can't see me, and I know I'm a spectator because this little eye icon, if I just close here, this eye icon here, that means I'm in spectator mode. And as soon as I click this button, I'm flying again. This person can now see me. I'm no longer in spectator mode. Okay, so that's all the functionality for multiplayer that we've changed. Something else to talk about is event mode. In event mode, if you're in manual mode, event mode doesn't make much sense, because in event mode, in a race, the first time you crash, that's when your race is over and you get red flagged. But of course in manual mode there's no such thing as a reset or a crash. So we've changed event mode when you're running manual mode, in other words arm, disarm and turtle mode. When you're in that mode and you run an event mode race, you'll only get red flagged if you get 100% prop damage. So you can fly, you can crash, you can flip back up, do turtle mode and all the rest of it, but the moment you hit 100% prop damage, that's when you'll get red flagged and be out of the race. So it's a bit more, much more like real racing really, which is that you can crash quite a few times in a real race, you can turtle back up and carry on flying, but once you've buggered your props, your race is over. And that's now exactly the same for event mode in VelociDrone. And then the last couple of things I want to talk about, one is quad size. So if you look at this quad sat on the field there, if I arm my quad here and fly away and look back, you can see I can still see that quad even when I'm really quite a long way off. I can still see him down there, and you can probably see that that quad is changing size as I get further away. So when I'm a long way off, it's actually got a little bit bigger so I can still see it. And that's a change we've made for multiplayer, so that when you're racing you can still see the other players you're racing against. So in 1.11, as soon as the quad in front of you gets just a little distance away, you can just no longer see them anymore. They're just really hard to see. So we've changed that. The other thing that we've done, which I'll just show you, if I just fly this other quad, let's just arm him, there we go. If I just fly this other quad, hopefully I've just got to work out where I need to fly that so that I'm actually in view. It looks like it's down this end of the stadium. Okay, I've gone to the, oh yeah, there we go. You can see me flying around down there. And hopefully what you notice is that the trail is a lot bigger and a lot easier to see, and the quad is also a lot bigger and a lot easier to see in the distance. And again, that's not just for people who are flying and playing multiplayer, but also for streaming. If you're watching a streaming event and you're having difficulty seeing the quads in version 1.11, in 1.12 you should be able to see them really quite easily. It should be quite much more visible. So it's easier to see the people that you're flying against if you're in a race, and if you're spectating a race or a live stream, then you can see the action and what's going on a lot better as well. The very last thing I'm going to talk about is anti-cheat. So in single class, if I just switch us to single class here, let's just disarm that quad. In single class, one of the things you used to be able to do was you could open the settings, quad settings dialog here, and then when a race started you could turn your battery off and then fly single class without the battery on. So we had some people doing that. It's not very well known about, but there were some people doing that. In 1.12, which is out next week, which is why I'm talking about this now, I expect a few more people may do this now that they know about it, but as soon as 1.12 releases, when you start a race, it closes that dialog, so you can't get in there, and you cannot reopen it. It will not let you in there until the race is finished, and then you can get back in there. So that's another anti-cheat change for multiplayer to stop those people who were using that particular cheat. Okay, I'm just looking at my checklist here just to make sure I've covered everything. I think I have. Hopefully you guys like the new changes. I think it will add a lot more fun to the game, the changes that we've made. Gives us much better scope for running tournaments and controlling the players in a tournament and organising tournaments. And for anyone who wants to run a tournament, it makes it much easier to do that now. We do have more multiplayer functionality coming, but this is what's going to be in the initial version 1.12 release. Okay, that's it, and I'll see you on the next video.